been much media attention across the world given to the removal of term limits for China's president. How does China's system of choosing its leaders differ from the systems used in other countries? And as China mulls over a draft supervision law as part of its anti-graft mechanism, who will be supervising the supervisors of a new national body about to be set up? Welcome to The Point, live from Beijing. I'm Li Xin. Elections are one way to ensure the peaceful transition of power in a country for the sake of its stability and long-term prosperity. Choosing an effective leader who can be dedicated to public interest is generally desired in all countries, no matter the political system. How can China's election systems ensure such leaders are selected or elected? Earlier, I talked to Victor Gao, Global Counselor at the Asia Society, and Edward Lehman, Managing Director of the law firm Li and Xu LLP in Beijing. Let's take a look. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
A very important subject here. A lot of people say China's election system is one that is called meritocracy. Exactly how does it work, Victor?
I would say the election system here in China has strong Chinese characteristics. It is different from any other country's election system, and the whole desire and the design in the Chinese system is to choose people well qualified and well vetted and well suited for the particular positions that they are supposed to serve later. And therefore, I think a lot of focus is on their qualities, qualifications, and their track record before. And this sets the Chinese system very much apart from the election systems in many other countries.
Mm-hmm. In terms of the procedure, for instance, how can these people with quality, with experience and expertise come up in the system? Dr. Lee, Mr.
Okay,
Lee.
yeah, so, I mean, 88.2 million people participate in are members of the Communist Party, so that's larger than Germany, the population of Germany. And generally speaking, the meritocracy is coming through this group and through this organization, which people participated in, are groomed for at a very young age. And there's a process that people are looking at. This is my opinion, and they're working their way through it. Not all of it is transparent, and it could be Machiavellian in its largest form, if you want to put it that way, in a more sinister way. But when you look at it, the process is much more difficult than just a raw democracy. And so I think that the leaders that have been coming out in the last 30, 40 years have been monumental and have accomplished monumental tasks. I know that doesn't necessarily answer your question, but the meritocracy is working through the party, and it's, as Victor said, it's an ongoing process that has been changing.
All right, just on the face of it, let's find the nose and eyes of the Chinese election system. So on the grassroots, until a certain level, I think the county level, you have a kind of direct suffrage where people will choose their officials directly. But then above that level, the MPC deputies, or the People's Congress deputies, would be selected on the basis of the lower administration. How do you explain that system, please? This is getting a bit complicated.
Well, allow me to say that the Chinese election system is in process. It's evolving. 40 years ago, there was no election at all.
At this moment, how does it look?
Yes, at this moment, after 40 years of transformation, it is very much depending on which level of the hierarchy you are talking about. Direct elections do happen for village heads, for example, for the delegates to the People's Congress at the very lower level, including in the district level, in the county level.
Right now you're talking about the delegates. These are the representative from the people who will be going into the People's Congress, which is kind of an equivalent to the
well, to the U.S. Congress. I mean,
you don't have an equivalent of that.
Well, yeah, we don't. I mean, but it's a lawmaking body as well. So I mean, the National People's Congress would be similar, and this is a hyperbolic, but to the United States Congress, okay, to a certain extent. I mean, Congress, our Congress is meeting a long part of the year. This meets a couple weeks or thereabout. Again, this is an outsider's viewpoint of it, but the National People's Congress, the selection of that, remember that it's not only what's happening in mainland, but there's representatives from Taiwan, there's representatives from Macau, there's representatives from Hong Kong. Those processes are a little bit different, but it's an indirect election. I think that would be the best way to put it. But the United States itself, I just want to remind viewers from the world, is an indirect election. The election comes from the Electoral College, not from the population. And 5 times in the United States history, we've had the non-popular person win the election.
But you're talking about the process for choosing the leader of the country, the president of the country, whereas here we're actually talking about the the deputies to the People's Congress until up to the top level of that People's Congress, which is the National People's Congress, right?
Yeah, for example, using Beijing city as an example, we have many districts in Beijing, like Xicheng district, Dongcheng district. Each district at the given time need to have election for the people's delegate. And this election at the district level, in my best judgment, is mostly direct election. That is, the organization committees, for example, would nominate, will propose a list of candidates, and these candidates have been vetted before, and they were deemed qualified to serve as the people's delegate. And then the slate of these delegates will be submitted to the voters, and the voters are encouraged to go to the voting booth to participate in the vote. And eventually, once they are elected, they will serve as the people's delegate at the district level. Now, going upward to the city level and eventually to the National People's Congress level, then the system is very, very different. Election or direct election itself is much less involved, and I think it's a more structured system of nominations, appointments, etc. And also sometimes one candidate for one position kind of election, which is more like a confirmation of the nomination system at a higher level.
How is the Chinese president elected then?
Well,
because this year during the NPC session we are going to have this process.
Yes, in China the highest organ of state power is the National People's Congress, which has a standing committee which roughly has about 260 members. The National People's Congress itself has up to about 3,000 delegates in total, and the Chinese president need to be selected or being confirmed by this National People's Congress. And I think it is one candidate for one position, that is one person for the position of the President of the People's Republic of China. So if you can call it a selection or election, I think, or confirmation of a nomination, and the whole process actually is very much complicated, because eventually the Central Committee of the Communist Party of China will do all the vetting, will do all the checks and balances to nominate the right person for the position of the presidency of the People's Republic of China.
Yeah, and just to try to put it in perspective for our viewers, because I mean, everyone's looking at it from their own lens. Think about, Victor just talked about Beijing and the direct elections that happen here. So let's just say we're a city of 25 million people here, approximately. You've got 16 districts, that's what Victor was talking about. You've got 16,411 square kilometers. It's 5 times the size. This city is 5 times the size of the state of Delaware, just by land mass. Okay, and then you've got a population that's the size of Australia, roughly here. And so we're talking about, we are conducting, Victor just said, direct elections for a country the size of Australia going on in this city, just to try to put it in perspective.
Right.
And then there's the indirect ones. And again, a lot of, up until 1913 in the United States, senators were indirectly elected. The state would do it. And it was actually Alexander Hamilton, which is in popular culture today, in this musical about his life. He wrote that said that these indirect elections stop foreign influence, and they stop other kinds of influences. So that we have a history of that as well, but I don't think our own people understand the history.
Right, because a lot of people, when they talk about the Chinese system, one word,
sure,
undemocratic.
Right.
You are not able to go and with one person, one vote, choose the leader of the country. How democratic is the Chinese system?
Well, I think, first of all, the Chinese system has strong Chinese characteristics. Secondly, democracy in China is also democracy with Chinese characteristics. China is different from all the other countries in the world, and I don't think any
in
other
what
country
way?
in the world
What makes
can
China
be
so different?
identical
Because of
to
the
China.
size?
Because of the size, because of the ancient history, 5,000 years, for example, because of the diversity of the country. We have altogether 56 nationalities, as we call it. And I would say the Chinese system, you call it democracy with Chinese characteristics or Chinese meritocracy, for example, in my best judgment, is a hybrid of thousands of years of civil service system in China, plus the Communist Party-led system, which come up with a very interesting system. China invented the civil service, and China was really leading the rest of the world in terms of the imperial examination and empowering the intellectuals,
right,
for example.
Which I think is fascinating, because Chinese, as an outsider, are addicted to education, and I blame it on whatever Tang Dynasty, Song Dynasty, when they had the imperial examinations or the government examinations, where you could move from the peasant class into the governmental class, and so that this is part of your life's blood. I mean, that the idea that you can move from one class to another. We didn't have it in Europe, where my ancestors come from, and so this, like Victor said, I think this is a very unique thing. This is not necessarily, our system, the United States, I would say, is based on individualism. This is more of a group kind of a process.
How about, however, how about the possibility of the individual member of the society to have their say on the most important matters of the country? For instance, even in a ceremonial sense, you know, you go, you cast that solemn vote, and you partly decide what the country is going to do. But in China, this is not happening on such a scale.
Well, in China, for example, we have, as Mr. Lehman just now said, almost about 87 million members of the Communist Party of China. They are very active. They participate in a structure which is highly structured and processed with a lot of hierarchy, for example, and each member definitely belongs to one of the numerous party branches, and the structure and the focus of that will enable him or her to play his or her role in the politics in China. If you are not a party member, you can choose one of the 8 democratic parties to join. And
or
that
as without any party affiliation, will you be able to also participate?
Absolutely. There is a larger group called the people without political affiliation, meaning if you do not have any political affiliation, you can still exercise your political right, etc. So you have the Communist Party member, 8 Democratic members, the General Chamber of Commerce for China, and the grouping called people without party affiliation. Now, further, if you work in the urban area, it's much better because the processes are all there. If you work or live in rural area, sometimes it's more difficult to be mobilized and to be put into the system to have your voice heard. So China, again, allow me to emphasize, is evolving. What we have suits our needs today. It may not be the best in the world. We are not in a position to compare the Chinese system with any other country. What works in China works, and I think we still need to do a lot of work to make sure elections are better run, democracy is more expanding, etc.
Right. But what are some of the measures, some of the work being done to perfect this system, to give people more say, more involvement in the process, meaningful involvement in the process, and to make sure that the officials' powers are checked? If they, misbehave, they will be punished, they will be prosecuted. What are some of the measures in place for that?
What I have seen, at least, what's very real and very tangible, is that when the laws, policies, and regulations are put out there, they actually are soliciting even foreigners, even people like myself. They're saying, hey, what do you think of these regulations? They're soliciting chambers of commerce. We don't do that in the United States. I mean, it's out there, it's open, and they're looking for genuine feedback. So I see that. I also see that that the netizens, and that's a term that I think we only use in regards to China, but the netizens are acting as a kind of a check and balance, and I think that it is influenced sometimes in a good way, sometimes in not such a good way, but it's out there and it's happening. So I think that there is some power that they feel, young people today, with that.
Victor?
Well, the system and the realities here in China are different. For example, in the United States, there is a premium to be put on by polarization. So the Democrats and the Republicans compete with each other by holding out different visions and different aspirations for the country. Eventually, sometimes they end up with internal turmoil, and the government gets shut down, for example. Yes, stalemate. Deadlocked, for example. In China, I think a lot of premium is put on maintaining stability, maintaining the unity of the vision for the country, rallying the people in the same direction, and the nation need to move forward in the same direction. And as a result, sometimes a dissenting view is not very much encouraged or tolerated. Then you can say each system has its pros and cons, etc. But the reality in China need to be fully recognized. That is, we have a ruling party, the Communist Party of China. We have a system very much geared towards mobilizing all the resources and moving the nation in one single direction. And that is the reality in our country.
Well, the discussion can go on and on, but we have to leave it there because of limited time. And many thanks to my two guests, Victor Gao, Global Counselor at the Asia Society, and Edward Lehman, Managing Director of the law firm Lee and Shu LLP. Let's go straight to our second topic. China's draft supervision law was submitted for its third reading at the National Legislature on Tuesday and is expected to be voted on next Tuesday. Now, the new law is an essential part of China's reform of its anti-graft mechanism. Supervisory commissions have already been established at the provincial, city and county levels around the country, and the National Supervisory Commission, or NSC, will be set up during this year's National Legislative Body meeting. But relevant provisions authorizing the establishment of the commissions have been enshrined in the country's constitution. So how does the system work? What role is the are the commissions expected to play in keeping corruption at bay, and who will be supervising the supervisors? Joining me for the discussion is Xu Qingduo, Senior Researcher at the Pango Institution here in Beijing, and from Hong Kong, Professor David Law at the University of Hong Kong. But let's start with this question. By the way, welcome to the show, gentlemen. Now, China already have its anti-corruption bodies, including the Central Commission for Disciplinary Inspection and other organizations, and they have made tremendous success in the past 5 years, especially in bringing corrupt officials to justice. So, Qingduo, why do we still need a new mechanism?
Well, I think the most significant message from the establishment of NSC obviously is the message that the effort, anti-corruption effort, will continue. Actually, will be reinforced in the next years to come. So for those officials, at which level you are, I mean, if you are counting the luck or somehow your misbehavior will go unnoticed. So basically, there's no chance for doing that. I think that's the purpose. It has the constitutional support. It has the endorsement of NPC, National People's Congress. So it's very powerful, and it will be here. It will be long-lasting, I think, permanent feature of China.
Basically institutionalized anti-corruption work. So, Professor Law, from your observation, who will be the subjects, the people that these new commissions will be supervising?
Yeah, so to understand why the NSC, the new supervisory commissions, are different and why this is a change in terms of who they'll be supervising, it's important to understand that under the old system, there were both prosecutors under the procuratorate, and they would go after corruption pursuant to the ordinary laws. And there was also the Commission on Discipline Inspection, which would go after party members for misconduct. And so you had a system where the prosecutors could go after, for example, business people who are offering bribes, and the Commission on Discipline Inspection was a party body. It could only go after public officials. So you had two different bodies prosecuting two different sets of people. So one of the things that the National Supervisory Commissions and the local supervisory commissions will do is they will combine the power to prosecute officials with the power to prosecute private individuals such as business people. And that is something that the old Commission on Discipline Inspection could not do. It could not go after individuals.
From your understanding, Professor Law, still to you, do you think there is anything in a Western-style system that is quite close, that can be compared to these supervisory commissions?
Yes, that's an excellent question. There are many Western systems that have some kind of an independent body with the power to investigate corruption, but none of them are exactly comparable to the National Supervisory Commission. First, most of these, if we look at, for example, France or Sweden or the Netherlands or South Africa, all of these countries have some sort of an ombudsman or a court of audit or an inspector general or some sort of independent institution that has the ability not only to hear complaints about the violation of people's rights, but also to investigate corruption. But the major differences between those Western institutions and the Chinese supervisory commissions is, first, the Western institutions are significantly less powerful. While they are very independent, they are not as frightening to people because, for example, they do not have the power to detain. The new supervisory commissions have the power to detain for 3 months, renewable up to 6 months. Another major difference is that these independent commissions are truly independent, whereas the National Supervisory Commission, they are staffed by people who used to be part of the Committee for Discipline Inspection, which means that they are party members, and so the party apparatus has, in a sense, is in a sense controlling the new supervisory commissions. So first, in terms of the powers of the Western institutions, they're not as powerful, and second, the Western institutions tend to be independent from any political party, whereas that is not the case for the National Supervisory Commission.
Qingduo, how do you look at the differences that Professor Law just highlighted? And basically from these comparisons, a lot of people are voicing the concern that this body, this mechanism could be a super body, it could be too powerful and that it cannot independently perform its job.
Well, you know, if it's too powerful, I think probably it's easier for it to do a bad job, to perform its work over there. And I think it's more comparable to the independent commission against the corruption in Hong Kong, ICAC. Like Professor Law mentioned, there are similar like commissions in say organizations in the Western governments, but not that powerful. But if you look at Hong Kong, the ICAC, that's very powerful. It reports to the Governor Erlin, and it is independent. In that sense, I think there are similarities between Hong Kong ICC and the new National Supervisory Commission over there. But of course, they are different, as Professor Law mentioned about, like you know, the party officials will be stuffed in the NSC. But I don't see that as a problem because it is supposed to be under the leadership of the CPC Central Committee. Well, remember that I mean, CPC Central Committee, or the CPC, is the leading force, political force of China. So that's not a surprise at all. I think it will basically serve its rightful purpose to clean up any corruption at any levels.
Basically, we have to look at a core issue here, which is this is a Chinese system unique to China's circumstances. What works in the West probably will not work in China, and definitely China does not exercise the kind of checks and balance system as in other, as in Western countries. Qingduo, explain to us a little bit more how one party can help clean up its own party members or, you know, public servants working in that country.
Well, let me give you an example. I think, you know, theoretically, a lot of people would challenge or question how can you supervise yourself as a party, but that's very abstract, let's say. But there are some, you know, concrete examples. For example, like the CCDI, Disciplinary Inspection, the Inter-Party Commission, basically. They, of course, policed like 1.5 million officials. I think like 25 Central Committee members of the CPC, and also 9 members of itself. So that's like disciplinary over there. So yes, it can supervise. I mean, the supervisory power can be exercised within this political party, within a single body over there. I think you know, if you look at it, the Chinese culture and tradition is a holistic approach. It's very different from the checks and balances, but that does not mean there are no checks and balances. It's really about to what degree, to what level you stress the checks and balances. Like a previous guest mentioned, in the Western governments, Western society is more based on individualism. People stress very much their own rights and freedom. So you need these checks and balances to make sure like politics will be conducted in the peaceful, stable manner over there.
Professor Law, are you worried about the effectiveness of this system, being that it is, again, a self-purification mechanism instead of somebody from outside exerting a supervisory role?
Yes, I think you've put your finger on an important problem here. This is the party being asked to watch itself. There is a recurring problem in constitutional design, and that is the problem of whenever you set up a watchdog institution, you always have the question of who is going to watch over the watchdog. And in this case, you have one problem, which is the party has set up an institution which is supposed to monitor the party. That's one problem. The other problem is that in the absence of checks and balances, we also have to worry about whether this new institution will in fact be too powerful, whether there's anything to restrain it from acting improperly. Now, whenever you create an institution to control another institution, that's vertical, right? But you can't, once you create an institution to control the new institution, then you create another institution to control that institution. You can't keep doing that, right? Eventually there's an institution on top and there's no vertical control. That's why so many Western systems and Western constitutional theory emphasizes the needs for checks and balances. Rather than relying on vertical control, what we hope for instead is horizontal competition among institutions that keep each other honest. Now, there were problems with the old system in China with both the prosecutors and the party discipline inspection commissions competing with each other. There was inefficiency, there was conflict, but one advantage of that old system was that there was at least competition between these two different forms of anti-corruption investigation. And whenever you have competition, that tends to highlight problems. Once you take away that competition, once you take away those checks and balances, it does become harder to tell whether a system is performing well.
Qingduo, one last minute to address the kind of the lack of the supervision to the supervisors. Besides having one layer after another of supervision, really there is no other way to watch on things?
Well, you know,
from practice?
If you look at the establishment of such a system, of course it reports to the National People's Congress, the highest institution of state power in this country, and also at the same time it's under the leadership of the CPC Central Committee. I think it's on the parallel level with the cabinet, basically, of China, and also the Supreme Court and the Proctorate over there. So it reports, it presents annual work to the NPC. I think that will be, of course, examination over there.
And also the CPC has a track record of self-correction because it understands its legitimacy lies on correcting itself and cater to the needs of the people. So that factor, I think, maybe would also help explain a little bit that question. We have to leave it there. Many thanks to my two guests, Xu Qingduo, Senior Researcher at the Pango Institution, and from Hong Kong, Professor David Law of Washington University in St. Louis and the University of Hong Kong. And finally, here is my personal comment. I think the supervisory system is a major innovation by China to step up and institutionalize its efforts to tackle corruption. Not only for foreigners, even for the Chinese people, it will take time to familiarize themselves with how the system is going to work. There are no textbooks to follow. Again, a unique Chinese thing, custom-made for the unique problems within unique, maybe not so unique problems, but custom-made for problems within unique circumstances. Now, as China goes further in its rule-based governance, legal problems which plagued the previous systems have the potential to be resolved, but is almost certainly going to be work in progress to improve the efficiency of the system while protecting individuals' rights and freedoms. That's all from this edition of The Point with me, Liu Xin. As always, follow me on Facebook and Twitter using the handle The Point with Alex. Download the application called CGTN to watch our show on your mobile devices, or go to YouTube and look for CGTN The Point. Thanks for watching. We've got The Point.